What's up, brother? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome to the conversation, the Mike Muse Show. I am so excited to be in conversation with this brother. Audience, I've had many interviews. I've had many incredible guests and subjects and the whole nine, but you guys know I am a geek on the inside. And I have been dying to talk to the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Mr. Michael Regan. What's happening, administrator?
Hey, man, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Mr. Administrator, why have you been hiding from me, brother? I've been trying to get you since day one, and he doesn't even know I've been trying to get to him. But I am just such a fan of yours. From black man to black man, I just celebrate you. The fact that you are the first Black administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency is insane to me, with celebration and sadness at the same time. Both can be true. And so I just thank you for that, because my audience knows on my show, I advocate so much for environmental justice and for really making the shift and changing the narrative around that. And so I just want to say salute, because when you came on, when you got into the administration, I was like, man, I hope he is really going to focus on environmental justice, and you have not let us down. So thank you for making that a priority of your administration, of your agency.
Absolutely. Listen, and I'm sorry it's taking me so long. So that means you got to bring me back time and time again so I can make up for the lost time, brother.
Oh, come back anytime. You can come back weekly. I was even talking to Yara Shahidi. I was like, I'm going to have the administrator on next week. I'm like, that's all I've been talking about, is how excited I am. But let me keep it linear. I know I don't have a lot of time with you. I've been talking a lot about the reason why, and it's from my own personal experience, Mr. Administrator, that I had checked out of the environmental climate change conversation, because for so long it had always been framed as polar bears, which are important and they need to be saved, and it's also a thing, but that was over there, right? It didn't feel immediate. The melting glaciers, which are important for rising sea levels and the whole nine, but that is somewhere up beyond Alaska. Like I wanted to save it, and I hope they're going to be okay, right? But I didn't have any connection. And then people really made me mad about the plastic straw thing from Starbucks. I'm like, I love Starbucks. Like, how is that a thing, right? And so all these things, but I never understood about the ways that it was impacting community and people of color, right, in urban-centered areas. And once I dug in, I was like, oh my God, like, how are we going to save us? So can we just talk about and level set about the way that climate change has been branded so that it hasn't felt inclusive for everyone to participate in this discourse?
Well, listen, I have shared that same frustration that you just laid out for so many years. And I'll be honest with you, especially prior to George Floyd and the environmental movement, many of us were kind of reprimanded for wanting to put people first, as if you can't talk about people and polar bears and the planet all at once. I think we're all one ecosystem, one community. And so let me start by saying leadership starts at the top. President Biden is the first sitting president to talk about environmental justice and equity during a State of the Union address. And so he has made environmental justice front and center. And that's given me the ultimate opportunity to do exactly what our communities have been begging for so long. Our communities are on the front lines of pollution, whether it be climate pollution, whether it be air quality pollution, water pollution. And so now, in this administration, we're prioritizing communities first, that being specifically Black and Brown communities, specifically tribal communities, specifically low-income communities. And so I think when we talk about climate change, when we talk about pollution, we have to first admit that Black and Brown and low-income communities are disproportionately impacted.
Let's talk a little bit and drill down to like real world examples. Because Administrator, what I did is I partnered with the National Geographic recently, and I did reaction pieces to their pieces. And one that I really focused on was the lack of trees. And I know the inequities of trees in Black and Brown neighborhoods and urban centered neighborhoods. And a part of that, they examined, like when you went to a high wealth network neighborhood in Los Angeles, and you look at the same street connected into South Central Los Angeles, you saw a decrease in percentage of the canopy or the shading from that suburban area to the urban area on the same street, same city. And the impact of not having any shade or trees has on a culture, on a community. And I had another environmental scientist on, and I really threw out to her the idea of does this have an impact on biological changes to our body, which makes us more or more likely to have reactions to violence and to arrest, especially in the summer months. And so we were able to connect and tie that to that. So if you could just give some practical examples so our audience can have an understanding when we talk about how it's impacting Black and Brown communities and neighborhoods, specifically an example of how do you see that?
Well, first of all, I'll say that you and I both know that climate change is real. And a lot of times when we talk about climate change, we immediately think about, hurricanes or storms, but we should just talk about and focus on the increase in temperature that this country is facing. And so when you look in our urban communities, in some of our communities, cities like Atlanta and others, when it's 5 to 10 degrees hotter in Atlanta in an urban setting than it is in some of the rural and broader parts of the county, then you understand that those people in that city, in that neighborhood, are experiencing a much higher temperature. We already suffer from higher rates of asthma and respiratory illnesses. We already suffer from other health disparities. You add that heat on top, and it impacts everything from school days missed to lost working days to you name it, agitation in the household, and it has a cascading impact. So yes, it impacts our community severely. And if you don't plant trees, if you don't have that shade, if you don't lower that temperature, you're just going to exacerbate all these other issues that we're dealing with.
Talk to me about the asthma and educate our audience, Administrator, on why we seem to have respiratory health incidents and dynamics and challenges within our areas. What is that attributed to?
Well, I'll give you a real example. I was in St. John the Baptist Parish, Louisiana, visiting an elementary school that was a stone's throw away from a chemical plant. And we're looking at the emissions and the pollution from these chemical plants. And then you start to look all through the Black Belt. You start to look through Cancer Alley. Then you start to realize that the highways, the chemical facilities, the pulp and paper facilities, all these things are in our communities in close proximity, and our lungs are exposed at a disproportionate level. And so you have this generational disproportionate impact, which leads to these health disparities. And that is exactly why the president has said redlining, systemic racism has led to environmental racism, environmental injustice. And that's why we made it such a focal point. If I do my job correctly, it'll create a rising tide in our communities so that we can increase jobs, economic prosperity, educational opportunities. It all starts with clean air and clean water. If you don't have clean water to drink and clean air to breathe, game over.
So is there a way, in terms of my audience is very active, very engaged in our democratic process from different levels, right? So I love to give my audience solutions and how to facilitate and guide and help be a part of the solution. When it comes to redlining, and I'm thinking about the way that the highways, systems, in particular, we're thinking about ways to redevelop and redesigning highways. Like, should we be paying attention and challenging our elected officials, in particular those who come to our churches, those who come to our fraternities and sororities, be challenging on how they're thinking about zoning, right, and urban planning when it comes to making sure that so much traffic doesn't go through urban center areas, or how can we redirect traffic away from urban center areas so that we don't get that air pollution? Is that a way to help solve some of these dynamics?
It absolutely is. And I'll say that, just last week, when the president signed the Environmental Justice Executive Order, what he basically said was it's not just EPA's job. It's DOT, it's HUD, it's DOD. Everybody, every agency in his administration must have an environmental justice plan. And so now you have EPA Administrator Michael Regan, Secretary Marsha Fudge at HUD, Secretary Pete Buttigieg at DOT. We're all putting our heads together saying, let's look at all of our policies and think through whether our EJ goals align. Housing policy, transportation policy, environmental policy, all of these investments are going to create a rising tide for our communities. And we all have, let me just say, I've got billions of dollars, billion with a B, billions of dollars coming into this agency specifically for environmental justice. So do these other agencies. So we need for our communities to engage directly to the point you made, whether it's zoning, whether it's transportation decisions, or our communities have had solutions for decades. So we need to now match these billions of dollars to the solutions that our communities have. We can't be paternalistic about it. So yes, we need for our fraternities, our sororities, our churches, our community leaders, everybody needs to understand that under Joe Biden's leadership, we have billions of dollars coming to our community, and we need their input.
So the billions of dollars that are coming to your agency, I know recently you guys have allocated $177 million for the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers program. How does that tie into the conversation we're having? And how can people tap in to those centers in order to address some of the issues we're having with the funding that's been allocated?
Yeah, great question. And so here's the deal. The Inflation Reduction Act gave EPA $3 billion to focus on environmental justice and climate justice. And so what we said was, let's not pretend that we have all the answers. So we took $177 million and we chose 10 centers all across the country to handle $10 million, about $10 million a piece. With that $10 million, you've got these technical centers that are going to take that $10 million and build capacity amongst grassroots organizations. Now, why are we doing that? We're doing that because we want these grassroots organizations to have the ability and the capacity and the grant writing skills to apply for $3 billion. So we don't want to just say we know what to do with $3 billion. We want these technical assistance centers to partner with local grassroots organizations to build capacity to apply for millions of dollars. That is the way we're going to solve climate change. That is the way we're going to solve this injustice and this inequity around economic opportunities. And we can do it at a much faster pace if we put this money into the hands of the people who know what to do with it.
So as a solution, and I know I can't keep you, how do we tap in? Do people go to the EPA.gov if they're a nonprofit to be able to pull down on these situations? Do you have the nonprofits listed in different cities so that people who are interested in this issue can find a nonprofit that received a grant and then figure out how to work with that nonprofit in order to facilitate some of these issues?
Absolutely. You can go to our EPA.gov website. We've got a prominent environmental justice feature on that website. And then it'll list the 17 recipients of that $10 million. And so each of these 17 are spread out across the country, and they really cover multiple states and regions. So you just click on the one that's closest to your state, and then you will find out exactly how to access these technical assistance dollars. But Mike, we have so much money. That's just one avenue. On that same website, you're going to see lots of grant opportunities that you can apply for and communities can apply for as well. So I just want everybody to know that when I say billion with a B, I'm just trying to emphasize that when you get into $5 and $10 billion focused on Black and Brown and tribal communities or low income communities, we've never seen this amount of resources before, and we need the participation level at the grassroots level.
This is going to be my last statement because we're wrapping for time, but you did tell me you're going to come back, Mr. Administrator. Right?
I did. I promise you that.
Because we didn't get a chance to talk about the clean ports and clean heavy duty vehicle announcement coming from your agency, or the clean bus grant competition that's coming from your agency. So there's still so many more to unpack with that. And cheers to all the work that you guys are doing to help solve, for these issues. But just from a conversational perspective, right? Like, what can you tell the audience about how to include themselves and see themselves when we talk about climate change, right? To make sure they're part of this conversation so that we're not erased from it, and so that the issues that impact our community go heard.
Well, listen, I can say first and foremost at EPA, I created an entire program office around environmental justice and equity, 200 people at EPA solely focused on community engagement and environmental justice.
That's amazing, Mr. Administrator. That's awesome.
And that's on the website. You go to our website, you'll see how to get in touch with these folks. And these are the people that are making sure that as these billions of dollars flow, that our communities have a seat at the table and get their fair share. And I will say, Mike, we're very proud. I'm proud of what the president is doing. Today, I did in Savannah announce $4 billion focused specifically on ports. And you and I both know that the communities surrounding these ports look like us, a low income communities. 15,000 trucks a day at the Port of Savannah. We're going to electrify those vehicles. We're going to reduce that pollution. And to your point, there's a lot of people that will say electric vehicles equals lowering greenhouse gas emissions and protecting polar bears. And on that same other side of the coin, it reduces toxic emissions and vehicle emissions that exacerbate asthma, that cause cancer, that really touch on people. So we're doing both. We're walking and chewing gum at the same time, saving people and saving the planet.
I couldn't be more proud of you. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for really pointing and putting a spotlight on environmental justice that has such an impact on the people of color and individuals who live in urban centered areas. If you find yourself in New York City, please come up. I would love to do a town hall with you to unpack some of these and so much more. Thank you for all that you do, Mr. Administrator.
Hey, well, thank you for lifting this message up and really admire the work you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Until next time.